Fishing a dry fly, basically, I've got a 9-foot leader set up. I've got it tapered down to 5X. I've got about a size 12 dry fly on here, so the 5X is appropriate for that size of fly. I've just got an attractor type dry fly called a Royal Wolf, which is world famous, and when I don't have fish that are actually coming to the surface and feeding, a lot of times I can get them to come up and eat an attractor fly. It just looks like something to eat, gets their attention, they'll come up and grab it. I'm going to take my fly floating. The first thing that I do is I put the silicone paste, or the gink you often hear it referred to as. I'll just squirt a little bit of that on there. I'll rub it in with my fingers, get the fly good and saturated with that. Once I've got the fly dressed, I strip off some fly line off my reel, pull out as much as I can, and go. Typically, here also, it's best to cast a dry fly upstream and across. In general, if I do not have specific fish that are coming up to the surface and eating, I'm going to want to fish this dry fly the same way that I approach the nymph. I want to have my checkerboard, and I want this dry fly to float dead drift or drag free through every square on that checkerboard. I cast up and across. If I need to, I can put a little mend on that. We remember that from the control system in nymph fishing. Keep as much line out of the water as I can possibly do without pulling the fly unnaturally. Now typically with a dry fly, I don't let it swing as much as I will the nymph. In some cases, if I got very tricky currents, I may only get 2, 3, 4 foot of drag-free float. Now by the drag-free float, I mean that the fly is riding at the same exact speed as the current, and basically it doesn't look like it's attached to anything. It's drag-free, it's riding at the same speed of the current. We also call that dead drift. Primarily, that's how I want to fish a dry fly. I'll cast it up and across. Notice I'm stripping in a little bit of line to keep as tight a control as I can. I'll lower to let some line onto the water. In some cases, especially with a caddis fly, I will let the fly swing. I can raise my rod and kind of skate that fly across the surface. A lot of times that will imitate an insect that's fluttering across the surface, and that can be just the ticket to get the fish to come up and grab it. But in general, I want to fish it dead drift, up and across. Right here I'm just lifting my rod tip, and I'm keeping as much of the leader and the tippet off the water as I really can, and I'm just making the fly kind of skate or skitter or bounce across the surface. Fishing a streamer setup is a lot different than fishing a dry fly or a nymph. First of all, my rig. My leader, if we remember, I want to be shorter and stouter. I've got about a 7.5 foot leader here, tapered down to approximately a 2X tippet. That's going to match up properly with the size of this streamer I'm fishing. Now I've got a marabou muddler, which is a good fly at this time of year, but this fly is not heavy enough to sink down to the proper zone of where I want it to be. Essentially, I want this fly riding at least in the middle, if not at or near the bottom of the stream. So I'm going to add split shot to this tippet. I've got a piece of split shot here, and I'm going to come up about 4 inches up the leader and simply crimp the split shot on. Now, if I fish this rig and I don't think I'm getting deep enough, or I'm just not catching fish, I might add more split shot, get it down even further. Sometimes I may have 2, maybe 3 split shot on the front of this leader to get it down further. Now another technique I can use is to use a sinking tip fly line in conjunction with split shot and weighted flies to help me get down even further. With a sinking tip fly line, I may go to even shorter leader, maybe in the ballpark of 4 foot, to get the whole system down in that water column. The main difference between my streamer technique and the dry fly and the nymph technique is here I've got contact with the fly. I cast it out and then gain control or contact, and I'm actually going to be pulling the fly through the water. So I'm not going to be raising the rod and not necessarily mending as much as I normally would. This is the same technique you would use fishing bass flies, pike flies, or even saltwater flies. I'm going to cast them out and make them act like something alive by pulling them through the water. Now I'm going to cast this fly usually up and across a little bit. I can cast it anywhere from straight across to up and across. The further upstream I throw it, the more it's going to sink down into the target zone. Then as it comes even with me or slightly past me, I'm going to point the rod down at it, line under the finger, and I'm going to strip the fly across the current and let it swing. I cover a lot of area here when I'm fishing in a stream. Now, when I cast it upstream a little bit, I can put a little mend on there which allows it to sink unhindered. That allows it to get down a little bit better and a little faster, and then I gain control and strip it across the current. Now I can vary my retrieves here. I can use short, quick strips, or I can use long, deliberate strips. And you want to experiment with this on any given day to find out what the fish are looking for.
If you like this video, hit subscribe. It helps out a lot. And check out these videos. We think you might like them too.